Hi everyone. Sorry I missed last week. I had some other things come up, and I was reading a couple of longer novels, which, not novels, but books, which required a little bit more of my attention. So, hopefully I won't miss too many more weeks in the future. People have been asking me, I've gotten asked a few times about providing the text of my reviews instead of just reading them into the camera, if I could sort of redirect people to where the text might be. So what I'm going to do is I have them all listed, the written out versions of the reviews on Goodreads. What I'm going to do is start linking to that, so you can either follow along as you listen or just have the words to reference. I know sometimes seeing the words is a little bit better than just someone listening to them. So the book I wanted to talk about today was maybe doesn't get as much attention as it should, like many of the books I review on this channel. It's a running theme. It is Escape from Freedom by Erich Fromm. Erich Fromm was an early, perhaps not the earliest, not Freud early, but he was a psychoanalyst and a psychologist who also was very broadly disciplinary. He was interested in things like politics and sociology and things like that. And this book is a book about how we deal with freedom in a political sense, what freedom is, and how we both fight for it, but we also, once we sort of gain it, how we have really interesting anxieties with it. When Camus asked himself one of the most famous questions in early 20th century existentialism, should I kill myself or have a cup of coffee? He was attempting to struggle with maybe one of the most powerful questions of modern society, both our struggle to possess freedom and then how to handle it once we think we have achieved it. But while freedom causes its own peculiar troubles at the level of the individual, whole new dynamics arise at the level of culture and society. So the main thrust of the Escape from Freedom rests on a psychological, sociological, and economic framework that begins by tracing the Middle Ages and looks at the paths that freedom has taken since the rise of modernity, which Fromm roughly co-equates with the birth of capitalism and the rise of Reformation theology, especially Luther and Calvin. Most of us have a rather naive model of how freedom is related to this arc of history. When I say arc of history, I mean around 1450 to 1500 to roughly the present day, at least the 20th century. Namely, we think that the more economic and political freedom that we have, and Fromm will call this freedom from, the better and more fulfilled we will be, individually and societally. However, just as Isaiah Berlin would do later with his 4 essays on liberty, Fromm suggested a dialectical approach to the notion of freedom. He sees not only a freedom from, but also a freedom to, as in Berlin would call this a negative freedom and a positive freedom. We have negative freedoms in that we have freedoms from other things. We have freedoms from violence. We have freedom from hunger, freedom from thirst, freedom from homelessness. But there's also a freedom to, that would be a freedom to worship as you please, a freedom to redress your grievances with your government, a freedom to have a freedom of speech. So there are these two senses of freedom, and they sort of rub up against one another dialectically. The naive model rests almost wholly on the idea of freedom from, at least according to Fromm. However, he clearly believes that individuals not only struggle with freedom, struggle for freedom, but also struggle with it. Complete freedom from meaning, from ties that bind us to each other, uh, from freedom from creativity, freedom from supportive communities, just being a complete atom of an individual is something that actually endangers institutions like the modern liberal state and participatory democracy, and causes us to take flight into other more precarious forms of government, as we saw happen all over Europe in the first half of the 20th century. Fromm begins his sort of archaeology of the modern spirit, I guess you could call it, with an analysis of how the medieval economic system slowly transforms into today what we would call proto-capitalism. During this transformation, the medieval person was able to pursue their own independent roles, following the breakdown of the apprenticeship system and feudalism more generally, but was simultaneously cut off from other roles. Whereas money was always a necessity, it used to exist for just necessities. Usury was outlawed, even by, and especially by, the Catholic Church. This was before the Protestant Church even existed, churches. In capitalism, money begins to be seen not as a means to fulfill particular physiological and safety needs, but as an end in itself. The goal of capitalism as just money acquisition. Just not learning new trades, new skills, but just to get more money, just to have it. Capitalism meant living in a new aristocracy of money that put people in a position where they could enjoy the fruits of new freedom and acquire a new feeling of mastery and individual initiative. On the other hand, they had to dominate the masses and to fight against each other, and thus their position, too, was not free from a fundamental insecurity and anxiety. The perfect storm of alienation comes when this radical change in economic circumstances is coupled with the rise of Lutheranism and Calvinism. Fromm argues in Protestantism breeds feelings like resentment and anger. It demolished the God of the medievals, who mostly believed in a God of unconditional love, and it made him a tool instead of an end. It capitulated before secular power and relinquished the principle that secular power is not justified because of its moral principles, and in doing all this it relinquished elements that had been the foundations of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Fromm says in his book, its doctrines presented a picture of the individual, God, and the world, in which these feelings were justified by the belief that the insignificance and powerlessness with which an individual felt came from the qualities of man as such, and that he ought to feel as he felt. Fromm cites 3 ways in which people can choose to escape from freedom. The first is perhaps the most obvious political way, and it is authoritarianism, wherein someone willingly chooses to submit control to a governing power structure that makes choices for them, and thereby defrays their existential anxiety concerning having to make those choices for themselves. Second is automaton imitation, where a group of people come together in the absence of an authoritarian regime or personality or charismatic figure, and basically impose norms, mores, and other exclusionary standards on others to sort of come up with something like an in-group and an out-group. The third is just destruction in a general sense, where in the absence of either of the 2 above options, someone can simply choose work at cross purposes with their own thriving and their own existence. So, for example, this can come in many forms, like on the more moderate lack of self-esteem. He considers to be one very mild form of destruction, to engaging in deviant behavior, to perhaps the commission of suicide, which would be the ultimate form, of course, of self-destruction. The important commonality to realize here is that all of these choices eliminate the anxiety-inducing feeling that comes with creativity, openness, and rational decision-making. Of course, none of these three are inevitable. Ideally, someone will engage in the act of self-realization, the humanistic work of challenging oneself by rising to encounter the spontaneous and creative activity that most parallels your own talents. Fromm knows that life provides no easy answers. He is even more percipient in realizing that the political way of life is yet one more way by which people can engage in violence, symbolic, personal, or otherwise. But his answer is to co-opt the words recently said of a Massachusetts senator who refused to behave herself, to nevertheless persist. Giving up and conceding existential ground is not violent, because the people who take the power almost always end up being totalitarians and despots, though that certainly does not help. The violence rests in the giving up of those few parts of us that makes ourselves human at all. Our creativity, our ability to create communities engaged in meaning making, working in and around what drives us with passion and curiosity, and to give and live life fully and selflessly. Political violence only works if it succeeds in making monsters of us first. And as Goya was all too ready to remind us over a century ago, it is exactly in the sleep of reason, in the concession of our internal, thoughtful lives, where these monsters are produced. Something to think about, and perennially important. Escape from Freedom by Erich Fromm. I will see you next week. Bye, guys.